Today, we're going to talk about the appraisal profession and the opportunities in appraising. Currently, over 65% of the industry is over 50 years old, and less than 7% is under 35, therefore, creating a gap that will definitely need to be filled over the next 5 to 10 years. And today is what we'll be talking about, the career opportunities and how to address that, and how by addressing it through accurate valuations, we can close the wealth gap. So let me start off by introducing myself. My name is Thaddeus Dawson Jr. I am a certified general real estate appraiser. I have been appraising since 1986, 87, somewhere around there. Licensing and certification didn't happen until 1992. Up until that time, if you wanted to be a real estate appraisal professional, you could pretty much hang a shingle outside your door and be whatever you wanted to be. There was no regulations to prevent you from doing that. There was some training involved that to be able to get you in that space. Most of that was offered through a couple of organizations and some lenders and some governmental agencies. However, it didn't become official until 1992. So that being said, I have been a certified general appraiser since that time. I'd gotten most of my real estate education and experience that was necessary and required at that time. And the licensing came about as a result of the savings and loan crisis, where the savings and loans crashed in the mid 80s. I want to say 85, 86, somewhere around in there, was when things started to go bad. We had the big national S&L crisis, and a lot of that happened, and that's around the time that I actually got started, which was an opportunity and entree for me to be able to get in the business. As of today, there was a recent report from the U.S. Department of Profession is 94.7% white. So if you want to round up, that would be 95%, and, less than 0.% black. So that is part of the numbers and some of the things that we'll be discussing on this podcast. It's the 10K MA, 10K BA podcast. I'm so very happy and proud. What we originally started out to do was to represent Black people in the appraisal space. And when I say the appraisal space, I mean on the valuation side and on the appraisal side, because there's nobody who advocates for Black people in the space, period. And as I started to travel the country, I recognized that it was beyond just a Black issue. It was an appraisal and evaluation issue for Native Americans, and for the federal government. So overall, it is a workforce development issue, because over 65% of the industry is over 50 years old, and less than 7% is under 35 years old. I actually have some slides and illustrations to bring those points home, and maybe we will definitely share those in some future podcasts. So right now I'm talking, giving a little introduction and a background of me and the organization and the need that I've seen in the space. I tend to talk a little fast and get excited about it. One of the things that I have come to learn, or an old African proverb says that until the lion tells the story, the hunter will always be glorified. And so the lion now has the pen and is willing to write and podcast and speak up. I have a book that I've been working on for years that has never been finished, and I am challenging myself here publicly and holding myself accountable to finish that book in the upcoming year. And the proceeds from that book will go to the foundation in order to finance the work that we are doing. It seems to always be up to poor people to solve poverty. And in this case, our ultimate goal is to close the wealth gap for Black people based on accurate valuations. So we don't want to make up the valuation in order to close the gap, but we also want to make sure that people of color are not penalized or imposed with the black tax, so to speak, which is been known throughout the history, spoken or unspoken. So recently, there's been a lot of attention given to bias in appraising. And one of the reasons that I started this, again, there was nobody advocating for Black people in the valuation space or appraisers. And the people and organizations who should have been doing it weren't doing it. And if they've been around for a while and they say that they're doing it, they haven't done a very good job at it. If you look at the wealth gap and how it is increasing and unchanging. And again, now you have organizations like the Appraisal Diversity Initiative, which is in its fourth or fifth year now. And now they are what they're calling Project Reach 2.0. Um, I do not believe Reach 1.0 was a success. However, we have been invited to the table for Project Reach 2.0, which I'm very proud to say. And this is after a year of our organization celebrating its first birthday. And so, as my brother Dallas always tells me, if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. And Black folks have been on the menu for a very long time and served up as fodder and really not being able to participate equally or fairly in the American dream. So that is part of what our charge and our mission is. However, we believe now that we can lead the whole appraisal community because appraisers have been traumatized and they haven't been represented. Part of that reason is there is no accountability in the appraisal space. Everybody thinks somebody else is taking care of the problem. Everybody else utilizes appraisals and don't really treat it with the respect it deserves on the uh, on how much it impacts the global economy. You can't have there's no place in the country that is not impacted by appraising. And I'll give you some examples. There's no place in the country that doesn't have a tax assessor's office. Well, the tax assessor's office utilizes property valuations, and those are done by appraisals. They're done by mass appraising. However, there's a shortage there as well. If you look at the roads and highways and bridges, those are all supported by right-of-way appraisals. So if you look at parks, infrastructures, cities, conservation, again, there's valuation that's needed in all of these aspects, and people don't tend to think about it like that. Now, when you start to get away from residential appraising, it becomes a more specialized type of appraising that's a little bit more deep and in depth. All appraisers start at the same space, be it residential or commercial. So, part of instead of just talking about appraisal bias, we have some solutions. So the two solutions that I came up with last year when I went to the Appraisal Foundation meeting in July in Washington, D.C., and I was wearing a 10,000 Black Appraisers t-shirt, and I told I was unprofessional and made people uncomfortable and wouldn't be invited back. Our first solution was Black people doing appraisals for Black people, meaning that if you have some representation at the table, you would have more opportunity to have benefit of the doubt. And this is not saying that the Black people I was talking about would be unqualified. This was making sure that they were qualified to perform accurate valuations. And our long-term solution, that was my short-term, and long-term was training the next generation of minority appraisers. And I still stand by that and hope to affect change. So part of what we were talking about is based on studies from different organizations and research. Was there was a disparity between Black property values and white property values ranging anywhere from 20 to 25% depending upon the organization who was doing the research. And when you get into the space, like anything else, what doesn't get measured doesn't get done. But in the appraisal space, there has been no accountability, no responsibility. And I spoke earlier about appraisers being traumatized in the bias in appraising. Well, part of the bias is the actual fact that the appraisal model is broken and outdated. So when you hear appraisers crying about looking at the market and looking at what they've been trained to do, they are definitely right. Most of the bias that I see in appraising is due to really bad appraising and outdated methodology. So therefore we get back to accountability. Uh, the appraisal and when I talk about accountability, there's different organizations that have been entrusted with this responsibility. First and foremost, the Appraisal Foundation, who was empowered through Congress to be responsible. However, they don't have any authority. All they have the ability to do is make suggestions. And then at the end of the day, they don't really have any accountability. They were the authors and funders of USPAP. Now, when the Appraisal Foundation was first started, it was primarily put together by the leading appraisal organizations at the time. One of those being the American Institute of Real Estate Appraisers, the Society of Real Estate Appraisers, the National Society of Real Estate Appraisers, the International Right-of-Way Appraisers, the American Society of Appraisers, I believe the AIFA. There's a whole bunch of alphabet soup that goes on in that space. Um, Fast forward, the American Institute and the Society of Appraisers merged, forming what is now known today as the Appraisal Institute. But back then, the American Institute of Real Estate Appraisers was the appraisal arm for the National Association of Realtors. So they since broke off and merged with the society and had been considered the leaders in appraisal education. And along with that, um, they were, in my mind, the leaders of redlining, racist appraisal valuation methodologies that have been adopted by the government with HUD. So, and in the predecessor to HUD, again, we go back to the beginning of the government being instrumental in these valuation policies. Um, and now everybody wants to know or is talking about the result and the bias. So it's a little bit interesting to me that now the Appraisal Institute, who's been the head of these discriminatory evaluation policies, is now the savior and the head of the Appraisal Diversity Initiative and expected to correct the past wrongs or at least address them. Again, there is little to no accountability in this space. HUD just had a recent agreement that was released that there was no finding of bias against the Appraisal Foundation, and they celebrated that. And one of the, which I found somewhat laughable, because they may not be necessarily guilty of bias, but under this 34-year experiment that we've been going through under the Appraisal Foundation, the appraisal profession has definitely not gotten better and absolutely has not gotten better for people of color, as evidenced by the most recent reports in wealth. So, and if you look at the numbers of appraisers, again, it's a very close knit, nepotistic type of business that you have to be related to someone. And because these organizations have had a stranglehold on the profession, not only has nobody been able to get in, now it's caused an overall workforce development shortage, and you can't produce appraisers fast enough. So the other part of the problem is you have so many people that are in the valuation space, but it's only the appraisers that have to have a strict adherence to USPAP, which is, if they were doing all the valuations, that would be fine. But now you have automated valuation models that don't have to follow USPAP. You've got brokers' opinions that don't have to follow USPAP. You have so many people that are doing valuation and it's being utilized where they don't have the constraints or the same rigors that appraisers have to follow. So I get it. Appraisers are upset. They feel like they're being treated as fodder and the primary cause to the problem. I believe they have a lot of accountability in the space, but nobody can bear all of the blame. And if there was more leadership in the industry and accountability in the industry, it would give some clear-cut direction. Now, there are some things that are going on now that will be coming online, such as appraiser bias training, which will help. But again, it's back to words and selections. And again, the model is broken. If you look at the bottom of today's residential appraisal form, it's dated 2005. It's 2024. So, I mean, if you think about how many cell phones have you had since 2005? I believe next month Apple is coming up on its 16th iteration of the iPhone. So everything has advanced except appraising. And the technology has advanced, but the appraisers have been slow to gravitate towards it. And they utilize the technology in underwriting, they utilize the technology in review appraising, but the appraisers are not utilizing the technology. The appraisal form that's dated 2005 was also updated. There's a updated in 2011 to use the UAD. Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae have been experimenting with the UAD for quite some time now. And as a result, they have a price per square foot now for every zip code in America, every door in America, every bathroom, every kitchen. You can come up with a contributory value based on data that has been collected over the years. This is where the appraisal industry needs to go in order to mitigate the bias. I do not believe you will be able to eliminate the bias, but if you move towards evidence-based, data-driven analysis, you can go a long way to mitigating quite a bit of it just through technology and utilization. But what that is going to require is appraisers to update their skills, change their thinking in the industry. So a lot of lenders Um, they are even waiving appraisals now. You can get appraisal waivers. Of course, you can't get those waivers in black communities. Those waivers and those are just based on the zip codes and the demographics. This isn't information that I'm making up. And a lot of it is going into credit score, zip code, strength of the neighborhood. But again, it's back to the lenders as far as is mitigating in trying to eliminate risk. So if we go back and we look at the history, again, we got to, if we ever are going to get better, we got to go back and look at the problem. I don't want to keep beating up the problem in nauseum. Everybody's already done that. I would rather us to be able to focus on real solutions. Again, um, if we just go back to recently when the predatory lending where black folks lost over 60% of their wealth, which they haven't been able to recover. And we look at the cases brought on by the Justice Department and the various organizations and the people responsible for that crisis. Um, these are the same people that are at the table now leading the diversity and inclusion effort. Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Chase Bank, Three Fifths Bank, um, the Appraisal Institute. And again, these are the same people we are tasking to be able to change it and wonder why things are not changing. So, what they did in Project Reach 1.0 was um, give out scholarships. I'm guessing because they don't give you the details, and we will be asking for some accountability. I'm paraphrasing here, but I'm thinking they've probably given out close to 1,000 scholarships over the last 4 years. Now, if you start to ask for numbers, how many people have finished the program? Everybody starts to speak Scooby Doo. Well, we don't keep those statistics. Well, you should keep them. And then if you ask how many jobs have been created, again, we're back to accountability. So um, the Appraisal Foundation has been led for 34 years by Dave Bunton. He's since stepped down over the last couple of months because he felt like he was being personally attacked at the ASC hearing, um, which I didn't think it was a personal attack. I thought it was asking for some accountability and to be the head of an organization and for you to say that you've only recognized discrimination or nobody's asked you about it up until the last 2 or 3 years, I thought was pretty unacceptable. And again, back to the lack of accountability. And what I speak about accountability and intentionality, I speak about cultural competency. These are things that I believe are really necessary in order for us to advance. And they're not just punchlines. So the other thing I have noticed since we started is, and travel the country, every time that I speak, I see somebody using some of my material in their comments or in their writing. And, I'm flattered that you all think enough of me to use my material and not give me credit. Again, it's back to lack of leadership and accountability in the space. There's a lot of folks that are claiming to be thought leaders because they can regurgitate other people's information and ideas. And the needle is not being moved. I continuously hear about outreach. That's all well and good, but I'm more interested in outcomes. So, what we at 10,000 Minority Appraisers will be doing is trying to get outcomes. We have successfully posted up the first ever National Appraisal Apprenticeship Program in the country, certified through the U.S. Department of Labor. Now, let me rephrase that. We have the first 2-year certified appraisal apprenticeship program in the country. The government has an apprenticeship program, but it's not open to the public. We have the first one open to the public, and we will be touring the country for the rest of this year, bringing awareness to the program, and then we will also be implementing the program uh, first quarter of 2025, rolling out in several states across the country, as I will update you on subsequent podcasts, and we will be tracking the progress of the program. And please hold us accountable. Please let us know what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong. I believe what doesn't get measured doesn't get done. As of today, our program has not been funded. So we will be also trying to raise funding as we go across the country. And this will be a combination of public private partnerships. We have several uh, partners that we will be engaging and announcing. Um, we have our fundraising dinner that we'll be doing in January to honor Mr. William T. Roby. He's 104 years old. He will be 105 in January. He was the first black appraiser in Georgia. In 1956, they didn't allow him to take his appraisal courses, so he had to go to Michigan to take his classes. And upon completing his education in Michigan, he went on to become a World War II veteran, Buffalo Soldier, member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity, and a professor at Clark Atlanta University. So he is what I refer to as number one in our 10,000 minority appraisers mission and 10,000 black appraisers mission. He is one of 10,000. So to him, am eternally grateful and hold him in great reverence. And even now, he still gives wise counsel and is an inspiration. I was with him earlier this year, and one of the things he always calls me young fella, and he's like, young fella, I know this change or transformation is not happening as fast as you would like it. However, you have a great responsibility, and part of that responsibility is allowing people to come back and join when they get it. It's not about when you want them to get it, and you have to extend that grace. So that was some very wise counsel that I am very thankful and appreciative of. And I just believe that God doesn't give you a vision without making a provision. And it was just up to me to carry out this responsibility and share this vision that I've been so blessed to be able to be a part of. The other part of that, when I talk about nobody really speaking for Black people in the space, has been just that. And just because I advocate for Black people and inclusion, that doesn't exclude everybody else. I just happen to love and represent the folks that we represent. And in my career, believe it or not, it has been white people who have opened doors, who have trained me, who have taught me, and given me this great gift of appraising. Um, when I started out, I couldn't get a black appraiser to help me or train me, which is quite ironic, but that's the reality of it. Even today, for us to carry out this mission and impact, it's going to take everybody, white, black, green, yellow, coming together, because there's not enough minority appraisers. There's not enough women appraisers. So the goal is for everybody to work together, um, play well in the sandbox. If you grew up like we grew up playing team sports, I got enough friends. You ain't got to like your team members, but you do have to be respectful of your team members. So everybody that we want to partner with in this organization will have three things. First, they'll have shared and corporate integrity. Secondly, we'll have shared stewardship. And thirdly, we will focus on cross mentoring. Everybody has something to bring to the party, and should be respected with whatever it is that they bring in. I'm always reminded, and I get tickled thinking about my grandmother. As you can see, I run my mouth, and this didn't just start, but she used to always ask me, did you ever think about why God gave you two ears and one mouth? Sometimes you just need to shut up and listen. And I think in the appraisal space, we don't listen. And all of these organizations, um, and even at the ADI, they come at this diversity from a paternalistic sort of view, like from on high, and wonder why they can't connect with people. Because you need to meet people where they are. And we've been very successful in meeting people where they are. We don't use cultural competency as a punchline. We listen. And even amongst Black people, we're not a monolithic people. We come in all shapes, sizes, and colors. The same for my Native American brothers and sisters. And again, we come in all shapes, sizes, and colors. And I'm so excited to travel the country, introducing our appraisal apprenticeship program, furthering our 1890 program. I'll speak a little bit about the 1890 program, which is also the precursor to the 1994 program. The 1890 workforce program is basically the 1890 land grant colleges. So, for those of you who are not familiar, let's start with the 1860, I believe it was the Merrill Act, where they started to um, take all the Native Americans' land to the tune of 11 plus million acres and proceed to ship them all to Oklahoma on the Trail of Tears. In 1862, they sold the land and formed the land grant colleges. You might know them as Ohio State, Michigan State, Penn State, Georgia, Auburn, Clemson, Kentucky, Virginia, West Virginia, Oklahoma, etc. In 1865, they abolished slavery. So in 1890, they formed the Black land grant colleges. Tennessee State, Kentucky State, Central State, Tuskegee, Langston, North Carolina A&T, South Carolina State, West Virginia State, Virginia State, Maryland Eastern Shore, Delaware State, etc. You get the picture. So in 1994, they formed the tribal colleges. So all of the tribal land grant colleges are 2-year institutions for Native Americans. So we will be touring those colleges as well, introducing real estate and appraising as a career alternative for those organizations. We're working with county, city, state, and federal government agencies because all of these agencies utilize real estate appraisers and they have a shortage. Again, it's back to being a workforce development issue. So as we tour the country, we will be focusing on rural and urban underserved communities and valuations. I'm really excited. We started our 1890 tour last year and were able to visit um, Arkansas, Pine Bluff, Tennessee State, Kentucky State, Central State, Langston, Prairie View. Um, who else? I'm sure I'm missing somebody, but we will get to all of the 1890 schools this year. Plus, Howard is a part of that program. They're not an 1890 land grant school, but they were included in the 1890 program that was written by a graduate of Howard, and I believe he referred to that as author's privilege. So I'm really excited to be in the space. I forgot Alcorn. That's Alcorn, not Alcorn. I was corrected several times. Um, Southern is also a part of that. I'm really excited to be working with the Policy Center out of Alcorn State. That's been a blessing with Missy Loris there, and just the beautiful, wonderful USDA reps. We were blessed to be at the 1890 USDA planning session last week in Washington, D.C. Met several of the school's presidents, several of the USDA reps. So excited to be working with the black farmers and working on heirs property. There's so much opportunity in the space. And again, the idea to be able to work with the next generation of valuation professionals is so exciting. And to be working with the group of partners that we've been able to accumulate along the way on this podcast, I'll be working with Miss Rashanya Aldridge, or we all affectionately know her as Shawnee Aldridge. Um, Her daughter Aria is at Tuskegee and is a scholar and doing quite well. Um, Mr. William Michael Cunningham, renowned economist, who I had the pleasure of meeting and being able to work with to get facts, figures, and estimates on impacts and outcomes economically for people of color and being able to close the wealth gap. My little brother, Mr. Bilal Sharif, he's now on the Appraisal Foundation board of trustees, and his term starts in January. Um, he's dynamic as well. We've also got George Dale, the father of data science and one of the true leaders and pioneers in real estate valuation. Other folks in his camp, Craig Gilbert, Paul Hahn. One of my favorite in the appraisal and podcasting space is MAI Tim Anderson. Tim is my hero because I believe he has the best voice in the appraisal business, and it's like listening to the quiet storm about appraising when you listen to his podcast. So there are some true leaders in the space who we plan to work with. We don't plan on working with everybody. We don't want to work with everybody. We just want to work with those who really want to make a difference, who bring some integrity to the table, bring some thought and consideration. And again, what we require is shared integrity, um, shared mentorship, no cross mentorship, and shared stewardship. Stewardship is so important because it's a responsibility, and there's never a wrong time to do the right thing. So, and the other thing about stewardship is it's not about what you want to happen or how you think it should happen. Stewardship is about how it should happen and the responsibility, even if it goes against what it actually is that you want at the time. And so this isn't going to happen overnight. The problem didn't happen overnight. So the goal is to get to 10,000. And the reason the number 10,000 is so important because at 10,000, I believe we are able to close the wealth gap by 10%. I believe at 10,000, you can impact the gross domestic product. So by 10%. Again, and again in appraising, 10% is the universal cap rate since the beginning of time. It's always a measure of higher or lower as far as investments. So I'm really excited to be able to do this in upcoming podcasts. I want you all to join us in changing this narrative and updating the appraisal valuation model. Um, we'll be coming to an area near you soon. So, and again, we're at the table on set. We're a member of the Appraisal Foundation. Again, there needs to be some accountability. We're a member of Project Reach 2.0. We will be there and hopefully representing and asking for plans that really make sense. Again, there's lack of accountability and intentionality when it comes to people of color and in this appraisal space. And you need people, appraisers should be leading this charge. We are appraisers and we will be leading this charge. Um, and I don't like to really focus on what everybody else is doing, but focus on what we're doing to implement the change. And I believe our appraisal apprenticeship program also works as an alternative for those who don't want to go to college. The AQB is looking for, and the ASC are looking for alternatives to college. College is not for everybody, but through training and coursework, I do believe that our apprenticeship program is a viable alternative. And we're calling on everybody to join us in this mission as we tour the country. Again, I'm very proud and I'm very excited and looking forward to continuing to grow this effort and making a difference in the space. And so moving forward, and there will not just be me here podcasting. There will be Shawnee Aldridge, as I talked about, and William Cunningham. He likes to go by Bill. So Mr. Cunningham will be joining us, and we will be talking about appraising and valuation and economic empowerment and closing the wealth gap and what that actually looks like and means for people of color. And it's not just about people of color, but when you're able to increase the gross domestic product and through accurate valuations, according to McKinsey, that would be an increase of $1.5 trillion to the economy. That goes to everybody. That helps everybody, just as the undervaluation and lack of appraisers hurts everybody. And there's probably at least another $1 to $2 trillion being left on the table from the federal government and the Native Americans due to outdated fee schedules. So we will be addressing those as well and bringing a little bit more clarity on how that can happen and where we are in the space of trying to correct that.